Welcome, everyone. We are so excited for you to join us for our virtual field trip to a turkey farm. If you could use the Q&A box to tell us your class name and where you're joining us from, your location, that would be great. We will get started in just about, a minute and a half, probably at 1 o'clock. All right, we're continuing to have friends join us for our virtual field trip to a turkey farm. Some of you have used the Q&A to tell us where you're joining us from. I see Ms. Edstrom's class from third graders from Lakeville. We have Miss Brenninger's kindergarten from, oh my gosh, OGEMA, however you say that, in Minnesota. Miss Ritchie's fourth graders from Pierre, South Dakota. We have the Homecroft Elementary School in Duluth joining us. Miss Ruins, fifth graders. Welcome to you guys. Miss Dolstall's second graders from Badger, Minnesota. Fergus Falls, Miss Sherman, second graders, we're happy that you are with us. Mrs. Wary's second graders from Eureka, South Dakota. Man, we have lots and lots of people joining us, and we're so excited to have you. So thank you, everyone. We are going to get started here in just a minute or two. There we go. Our timer is up. My name is Sue Knott, and I'm an education specialist with the Minnesota Agriculture in the Classroom program. And we are so excited to host our 8th virtual field trip to a turkey farm. So for 8 years, we've been visiting a Minnesota turkey farm to meet a turkey farmer and hear how Minnesota grows the most turkeys in any state in the United States. So I'm joined by my coworker, Carrie Seidel with Minnesota Ag in the Classroom. She's going to be doing all of our technology. And we are going to introduce you to Jake Vlaminck, a turkey farmer at Fallen Farms near Lake Lillian, Minnesota, and his daughter Sadie is our camera person. So as we meet Jake, please, students and teachers joining us, use the Q&A feature in Zoom to put your questions in that feature. And if you're joining us on YouTube, use the comment section, and we'll try to ask as many questions as we can during this 30 minutes of fun on this virtual field trip. So I'm going to take us virtually to Lake Lillian, Minnesota, and introduce you guys to Jake Vlaminck. And like I said, his turkey farm is part of Fallen Farms. And Jake, why don't you tell us a little bit about your farm?
Well, hi, welcome to Fallen Farms. This is our G site location. We have 4 barns on here. And I chose this barn, barn 3, simply because it's closest to our technology. In that little room over there, I have a router, Wi-Fi router. So we use a lot of tech on the farm. I wanted to make sure we had a good, clear signal for everybody. Fallen Farms is the name of the township. Fallen is the name of the township we occupy. So that's what we use to describe our farms. We raise about 240,000 turkeys a year. These are all toms, so they're all boy turkeys. Their sisters, I guess you'd call them, they're hens. They would normally go to what you would have for Thanksgiving dinner for roasted turkey. These guys, we raise them all year long, and they'll go into further processed products such as mostly ground turkey, but there's other products out there like turkey bacon, sausage, deli meats. Interesting fact. Now, this is actually, these birds, they'll produce, when they're full size, they'll be about 48 pounds. That's what we sell them at. So obviously way too big for your oven. But that's what we want for. Go
Awesome.
ahead.
Thanks, Jake. Tell us more about these turkeys. So you told us they're toms, so they're all boys. Why don't you start by telling us how many are in this barn and how old they are and how much they might weigh? We already have a question from Miss Allman's fourth graders. How much do the turkeys weigh?
Sure. I forgot to tell everybody I'm here with all my friends, but they're really just a bunch of turkeys. So these birds, they're currently 8 pounds. We just moved them into this barn. This is a grow out barn. So this is where they'll live the next, we'll sell them when they hit 20 weeks. So they'll be here for the next 12, 13 weeks. When we start them out, we get them into a brooder barn, and they're just little baby chicks, and little yellow fuzzballs. And we grow them up in that brooder barn until they hit 5 weeks of age. And then we'll move them out to a bigger barn so they have more room to move around. And right now they're 53 days old, weighing in just a little over 8 pounds.
Okay, so they're 53 days, 8 pounds, and you said they can get up to 48 pounds. How old would they be when they're 48 pounds?
It'll be 140 days old, 20 weeks.
Okay, so they're full grown 20 weeks. Why don't you, if Sadie could do some awesome camera work and maybe get close up on one of these turkeys, and Jake, you can tell us some of the cool features or unique things about a turkey.
So if you look at the turkey, one of the first things you see on the top of their head, it almost looks like a little worm. It's a little piece of fleshy material that comes out right at the top, right between their eyes, the top of their beak. That is called a snood. It's really small right now in these guys because they're so young, but as they get older, it'll get more pronounced. It'll start to come down the side of their beak and kind of hang over one side or the other. Um, that is pretty much like a comb on a chicken. They use it to help regulate their body temperature. So as they're warm, the snood will get longer to help dissipate more body heat. No, he's stretching his legs. Um, you'll look at they got that little fleshy material right below their beak that comes down to their neck, and just below their neck area there's an area there called the crop. And then when they eat and drink, that's where all the material goes into initially, is into the crop before it goes into their gizzard and then through their stomach. You can
Okay,
some of them are, yep,
here's a question from Mrs. Gregory's class in Rockford. Her students are wondering, why are these turkeys white and not brown?
sure. So that's an interesting question. So when turkeys, wild turkeys are naturally a brown or a dark colored. These have been selectively bred and through time to get them more white feathers. So they're when if you took a wild turkey and you were to pluck it to prepare it for eating, it's going to have some dark pigments in its skin. And the dark pigments weren't exactly appetizing, so they started selectively breeding turkeys to get the feathers to be white. So when the feathers are removed, their skin is more translucent, it's clearer, so it looks nicer in the on the dinner plate.
All right, awesome. So Mr. Randall's class is wondering if these turkeys are a specific breed.
These are actually, yes, we buy two different breeds of turkeys. These are called Nicholas Super Select. In the other barns, we do have some hybrid converter birds. Those are the two main companies that we get turkeys from.
Okay, excellent. So Mr. Hoffman's class, they're joining us from West De Pere, Wisconsin. They're wondering about your barn. Could you tell us how big your barn is and some of the unique features of the barn?
Yep, the barn from side to side, the length is was it 72 feet? You got the poles in the middle, and then the length from end to end is 420. So one of the things we look at is how many birds we can have in a barn. We want to make sure they have plenty of room to move around. We plan for them to have about 3.5 to 4 square feet per bird. So inside this barn right now is just under 10,000 birds in here.
10,000. That's a lot of friends to have in your home with you, but it looks like they're pretty calm and comfortable. And I know we're looking at a line right here that looks like there's some feeders. Could you tell us about that, how the turkeys are fed in your barn?
Yep, we can go down to the end over here where the hopper's at. So this turkey, there's a flex auger in there that carries the feed from the hopper there all the way down to the other end. And down at the other end, there's a switch that'll tell the feeder when to turn on and off to make sure the feed's distributed through here. The feed comes into the barn through a cross auger. You can kind of see that pipe right there. It comes up, angles over, and then this tube drops down. On the far end of the cross auger is a motor that turns it on. Inside here is the turkey feed. This is what they're getting to eat. It's a mixture of corn and soybean and some fats, and it goes into a pellet. So that way we have a uniform feed that will be carried throughout the whole barn with this pelleting stuff.
Okay, and then it goes from there into the individual little feeders?
Into the little feeders, and then the turkeys eat right out of there.
So we have had a couple classes ask how much do turkeys eat? So do you have any, could you guess or tell us how much a turkey eats in a day?
That's a good question. I don't really have a number for that. I will tell you, it takes about 2.5 to 3 pounds of feed to make a pound of turkey meat. So if you figure when they're 48 pounds, take that times about 2.5. That's how much turkey feed they'll eat in their lifetime.
And they can eat whenever they want. It's not like they have special meal times. They just eat whenever they feel like it.
Yep, the feed's always available to them, 24/7.
Excellent. Okay, Mrs. Peterson's class from Morris, Minnesota wants to know, how do they eat and how many gallons of water do they drink a day?
That's a good question on how many gallons of water. I do have a spreadsheet for that, but I don't have the number at the top of my head. Well, depending on their age, they're probably gonna, whew, they're gonna get a couple gallons of water in a day. Turkeys were just drinking from this water trough. So when we get water to the turkeys, there's many different ways of watering them. Different growers will have different setups. In these barns, we use water troughs. It's a little bit older of a method to do it, but we feel like they get a good drink of water because they have all this water available to them in this trough to be able to scoop up and swallow. It's interesting with turkeys too, in their physiology. They don't have muscles in their esophagus like we do to help push that food down. So they depend a little bit more on gravity. You'll notice when they're in here drinking, they use their jaws to help push the moisture back or the water back into their throats, and then they tilt their heads back and swallow. You can kind of see over in that water trough over there. Sadie can turn the camera to it. They're drinking right now. They put their heads in there. They use their mouths to pick it up, and then they tilt their heads back to swallow.
Interesting. Well, it looks like they are well fed and well watered. So we have a few other questions. Mrs. Slate's class is wondering, do they ever get too hot or too cold in this barn?
Usually not too cold because we have heaters to help keep the barn temperature up. They can get too hot in the summertime. In the summertime, we will open up some vents. Over on this wall over here, if Sadie can turn the camera slowly, that is actually a curtain on the other side of that screen. And so that curtain automatically is controlled by a computer system too. It measures the temperature in here, and it'll lower that curtain down to let in more air and get a cross draft. So it's really hot in the summertime. Both the curtains on the south side and on the north side will open up to help get a cross breeze through here. But if it's even still hot, too hot at that point, there's a series of fans along the north wall that will kick in, again, based on the temperature sensors that are in here, and start providing more air, more of a cross draft in here to cool them down. So it's more important to keep them cool than to worry about them getting hot. Once right now you can tell, I don't know if you can hear, these heaters actually aren't running right now because there's enough birds in here and it's warm enough outside that their body heat is what's keeping the barn warm.
So what would you say, Jake, is the ideal temperature for these 53-year-old day tom turkeys?
Right now we got the barn set at 69 degrees. It's about 70 degrees. We'll slowly be ramping it down, and that's, like I said, that's built into a temperature curve. So we know that when they get to the bigger size, when they get to 40 plus, we want the temperature to be 50 degrees. And so as they age, the computer system will curve the temperature down automatically to get them the most comfortable temperature for their age. So it's going to change on a daily basis. That's why I said it's 69. Yesterday it was probably 69.5. The day before that it was probably 70.
Okay, well, it looks like they are very comfortable. And this is a question from a class. They want to know, do the turkeys seem like they're getting along okay right now? Do they ever fight?
They do when they get older. And that's a challenge with raising toms. Once they start to get over 16, 17 weeks, that last couple weeks before they go to market, they start to get pretty aggressive with each other. And when you come into the barn, they look at you as just another big turkey. And so they'll start getting aggressive with you. So they'll come over and peck and bite at you. It's usually not too bad. One of the tricks we got to do in the barns is make sure all of our equipment's working good before they get to that age, so we don't have to spend as much time in here, because otherwise, if I'm in here trying to fix something when they're at that aggressive age, they will peck my fingers. And it just doesn't hurt too bad. But the problem is it's just really annoying when you're trying to fix something and they're over there swarming around you and pecking at you. They're more curious than anything else.
I was just going to say, but they're curious. They want to know what you're doing. All right. There was a class. Here we go. It's Jade in Mr. Olson's fifth grade class. He's wondering, or she, Jade could be a boy or a girl, why are you wearing plastic bags on your shoes?
Oh, that's a really good question. These are to protect. So anything that I may have been picking up when I was outside, I put these on my feet to make sure I'm not spreading it around in the barn. And then when I leave, I'll take them off and throw them away. So anything that's in the barn will stay in the barn. So whatever's outside stays outside. Whatever's inside stays inside. That's where I'm wearing coveralls too. Barn specific clothing to make sure that whatever's inside this barn stays inside this barn. Whatever's outside the barn stays outside.
And that's a couple questions we have. Miss Sauer's class is wondering if there's any predators or things that affect your, are predators a problem? Mrs. Sauer's fifth grade class is asking. And then Mr. Hoffman's class is wondering if turkeys get sick. So maybe talk about that, some things that can happen that maybe aren't so good for those turkeys.
Yep. So there are predators that that's why one of the reasons why they're inside of a barn is to make sure that they're protected from predators. There are some turkeys that do get raised outside for special things. And that's another challenge that those growers will have, making sure that they can keep their animals protected from predators. Things like skunks and fox and coyotes will try to attack turkeys. We've had it too in the past when in the summertime when these curtains are wide open, coyotes will be walking around outside trying to figure out how to get in. So we want to keep them out. Another thing we do is we make sure we have plenty of bait outside for mice so that the mice don't try to get into the barn. Because if mice get into the barn or other animals get into the barn, they might drink from the water trough and then spread a disease called cholera, which will make the turkeys really sick. So that's another reason why we keep them indoors to protect them against any diseases that they might get naturally otherwise.
So we know that birds, sometimes turkeys can get sick. Maybe some of the students have heard about the avian influenza. So we're curious, how do you keep them healthy and how do you keep those diseases from affecting your turkeys?
Yep. One of the biggest things is biosecurity, is making sure that we keep, like I said, everything that's outside. So we put on barn specific clothing, the barn booties, and we have in the entry system over there, it's actually two parts to it. You got the first part where you come in, that's where you would start to change. And then on the other side, there's a board in the middle that divides it. That's where you want to make sure when you step over, you're slipping on your booties as you slip over, or making sure you're putting on barn specific shoes. If you have barn specific shoes, they would stay in the barn. There is a pair in there, but those actually belong to my brother-in-law. That's why I'm wearing the booties. He wears his own barn specific shoes. So that's one of the ways, is just making sure that you're keeping everything outside, keeping it, trying to keep it clean. Figuring the inside of the barn is clean, the outside is where it's dirty. Other things we do with like the avian influenza, that gets spread through waterfowl, so wild ducks and wild geese mostly. And we want to just make sure that they go somewhere else. They don't hang around our turkey barns. And I don't know if there's a picture you might be able to throw up of a laser that we installed. And the laser sits on top of the barn, and it's a little green laser, just moves around, and it just the picture you have there's at night, but the wild birds can see that in the daytime too. Our human eyes won't detect that light in the daytime, but wild birds will. They'll look at it, they'll see it as a threat, and they'll just move away. So they'll go somewhere else, go sit out in the creek or the slough somewhere else and stay away from our barns. So we have less chance of that avian influenza getting into the barns by keeping them away.
Awesome. So a laser to keep those bad germs from your turkeys. Yep. Okay, so go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, we use a lot of high tech and low tech. Some of the low tech stuff would just be like a plastic owl that we would put on top of the feed bins. That'll keep away some of the rodents and other animals that we don't want near our barns. Some people have used things as a plastic coyote, and they move it around out there around their barns once in a while to keep wild birds away. And then the high tech parts, of course, is the laser. There's also air cannons that'll fire randomly. That'll scare birds away as well too. So it's all about just making sure these guys stay healthy so that they can grow up to be big and healthy, and we keep them as happy. That's our motto. I don't know if you can see that on my hat, or you probably saw it on the sign. Happy turkey, healthy turkey. The happier we can keep them, the healthier they'll grow.
So we did
provide good conditions.
Yep. We did have a couple questions, Jake, about how can you tell how much they weigh and if they're growing, how you want them to.
Yep. So, well, obviously a lot of it's just by body size. If you can see one here, he's dropping his wing feathers and he's puffing up his body feathers, and his tail feathers are spanning out. That shows you that they're happy because he's proud. He's parading around, strutting his stuff. So that's one way to look to tell if they're healthy. You can see they're all alert. They got their heads up. If they were sick, they might be hanging their heads. We call it being depressed because that's what they look like. They look like they're depressed. Their heads are hanging. And as we move through the barn, they'll move away from us, and then if we look behind us, they'll start filling back in behind us because they're curious. So they usually follow. But this is one thing, is a tool we use. This is called a platform scale. And so all the turkeys will get on there, and at the top of this platform is a load cell, and that load cell sends a signal back to the computer. And the computer says, okay, this is what I'm weighing. So based on what the age of these birds are, this is how much I think they should weigh. And it'll divide it out and say, well, there must be 2 birds on that scale, and it'll get an algorithmic formula to give me their average weight. And that's how I know they're about 8 pounds right now, because actually I can go look at the computer and it tells me they're about 8.1.
And it looks like they like jumping up there. When we walked
Yeah,
over, there was a bunch of them on there.
yep. They like to be elevated. And so sometimes you'll see they'll perch on the feed line too. That's one of the things we'll do with the feed line is we have this cable here and it's not energized. Sometimes it's set up so it could be energized. So what I'm saying is it could be electrified. We haven't had to do that, but just by having that wire there, it makes it a little too uncomfortable to perch on there. And so they stay off that way. If we had
Sure.
all the birds, if that wire wasn't there, a whole bunch of birds would be perching on there. It'd be too much weight, and eventually we would be pulling these cables down and suspend this. That's one of the interesting things is everything's suspended from the ceiling in here. So once all the turkeys go to market and they're all gone, all this stuff gets lifted up into the ceiling so we can drive in here with tractors and remove all the litter.
Yeah, and that's a couple questions Mrs. Davis's class right now. I'm looking at their question. They want to know, do you have to clean the barn? And if you do, how often and how does that happen?
So we do a total clean out every time after we market the birds. So we don't have to clean it in between. What we do in between is we just add some more wood shavings. So that's what's on the ground here. That's all crushed up wood. And the wood, we get it from different uh, lumber mills that might be making windows or paper, or it's leftover material from when after they've made their product, they'll shred up the rest of it, and we just have to really pay for it getting it transported in here. And so we'll amend this, add to it every week or two to make sure they have fresh, clean shavings.
Jake, would you be able to pick up a little bit and then maybe Sadie can get a close-up look? It's kind of hard to see exactly what it looks like. So if we could get a close-up look, maybe kids could envision it's maybe similar to what they might see on like a playground, just some kind of really fine ground up wood shavings.
Yep. If you go into some farm service stores, they will have bags sitting up front. It'll say small flake wood shavings, very similar to that.
Excellent. And you mentioned earlier that it doesn't smell bad, like it's not like it stinks.
No, it's actually really clear in here right now. What I mostly can smell in here right now is actually wood shavings. That's what it mostly smells like in here, and that's just because we keep this controlled with the wood shavings. We'll till it as well too. Once we start to get to a point where you can see it's just starting to form here around the feeder, because they all stand around here, and you start to get a little divot where the feeder's at. And once the ground gets really uneven, we will till this before we actually amend more shavings to it.
Sure. All right. Well, Mrs. Armstrong's first grade class has asked a bunch of really good questions, but I'm going to pick this one. They want to know, do turkeys lay eggs?
They do. Only the girls do. And it is possible for there to be a hen in here. So when they're a day old, when they hatch at the hatchery, there's people who work at the hatchery that are very talented, and they do a special way of telling if it's a male or female, but it's not a perfect science. So sometimes we do get some hens in here, and it's not unusual that after we've cleaned the barn out, we might find an egg or two laying around. Those eggs we don't use for anything. They usually just go out with the litter. But otherwise, there's other farms that specialize in just hatching or laying eggs, breeder farms. And so it's a specialized market. We're growers. We grow out further processed toms. There's other growers that'll grow hens. And there's other people in the market that will raise hens to hatch to lay eggs, and they sell those eggs to a hatchery. And there's other people who will raise big toms just to get the milk from the toms in order to fertilize the eggs.
So is there a specific hatchery where you get your eggs from or your poults?
I get mine all through my processor, and they have several different hatcheries. There's one located in Detroit Lakes, one in Henning, one in Barron. So most of them will all come from one of those three hatcheries or Foley, whichever ones that are at that point, because it takes about 28 days after they set an egg for it to hatch, and then they get the hatchling. They box them all up, they truck them to us, and we get them on the ground and get them feed and water right away.
Excellent. Okay, here's a question from some viewers on YouTube. They want to know, how many pounds of shavings do you need for this barn?
Pounds. Well, that's a good question. We don't really measure it in pounds. We'll measure it in cubic feet. And I try to remember how many cubic feet or cubic yards I have in a truckload. But if you look at a semi-truck, think of a semi-truck full of shavings. There's one of those in each barn. So this barn has got one semi-truck full of shavings in it right now, and then we'll amend to it So eventually we'll end up using about 2 loads in this one barn to over the lifetime of these turkeys.
Excellent. Okay, we've had a couple questions. This one is specifically from Afton in Mr. Olson's class. Want to know how many people work on your farm? So if you could tell us a few more details about the people
Oh,
involved in raising these chickens, or I almost said chickens, turkeys.
turkeys. So that's one of the unique things about Minnesota turkey. We have a lot of family-owned farms, and it's all generational. Uh, I'm kind of a first-generation farmer. I started working. I was in another career path, and my father-in-law had raised turkeys for about 60 years, and he wanted to start raising turkeys with his own offspring. And so he purchased a set of barns and asked me if I could help run the business. And so I left my former career, and I've been with raising turkeys now for 7 years. Um, but there are a lot of farms out there that are multi-generational to get going down to the fourth and fifth generation of raising turkeys together as family. That's one of our former presidents of the Minnesota Turkey Growers Association. He referred to turkey as family, and it is. It's a family business, family lifestyle. Obviously, my Sadie's my daughter, so that would be my father-in-law's granddaughter, and then I have a brother-in-law that works out here as well. These are actually his barns he manages, and my father-in-law manages a set of barns. And then I actually have a hired man who's actually my brother that works out here as well too. So right now we have 6 people on staff.
Excellent. Okay, thanks for telling us about that. And Sadie's on the camera if you guys missed that at the beginning. So Jake's daughter Sadie is involved in turkey farming and she's our camera person today. So we have just time for a couple more questions. There have been a few questions about the feet of turkeys. People are curious if they have sharp toes and how they're able to walk on those wood chips. So Sadie, I don't know if you're
Yep.
able to get a close up of their feet, but if we could look at that and maybe Jake, you tell us a few unique things about how these turkeys walk and are able to move around. Oh, there we go.
Yep.
Good work.
Yep. Yep. You can see they got those 3 toes that stick out front, and they have another toe that's kind of right behind them there, almost like their big toe or a thumb. And they can, most of their weight is balanced out on the tips of their toes or the middle of their toes as they walk along. And the
Excellent.
shavings are soft, so they're quite comfortable. They do have little claws on their toes. So with the male turkeys, we don't trim their toenails. Main reason why we don't trim their toenails is they have better health with their legs if the toenails are kept whole. The other thing that happens here is those little toenails act like little tillers and keep all the shavings broken up and agitated.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so these are some questions, Jake. I don't know if you'll know the answer, but people are curious if these turkeys can fly, and if they do, how far they would be able to fly.
They really can't fly. They can glide for short distances. Sometimes they'll be up on the feed lines when I'm raising them, and then I have to kind of push them off, and they'll glide down they'll open their wings. Very short distances that they can glide. You're talking maybe 4 or 5 feet, basically stabilizing from falling. But otherwise, their body is way too heavy, and their wings are way too small for them to actually take flight.
How about running? There's been several questions that are students who want to know how fast a turkey can run.
Faster than I can.
Probably me too.
Sometimes I have a hard time catching them. They can move pretty quick. As far as a number to that, I wouldn't have a clue.
Okay.
But they do move pretty fast. You can see if I come close to this guy, he'll move away pretty fast.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. All right. Well, we just have a couple more questions, and these are about your personal favorites, Jake. So the first one is, what is your favorite way to eat turkey?
Good question. There are so many ways to eat turkey. I love it all. One of my favorites though is the creamed turkey gravy. So you have chunks of turkey in with the gravy. Put that over mashed potatoes. That's really good. Roasted turkey though is a classic. Just the same thing you get from Thanksgiving. And then a lot of ground turkey. I'll make turkey burgers. I'll use ground turkey to make turkey burgers, or I'll also use it to put into lasagna or chili. Turkey is really a good substitute for anywhere else you can use ground beef. There's about
Awesome.
a serving of turkey, 100-gram serving of turkey has a little over 30 grams of protein and only 2 grams of fat.
So an excellent nutritional source for us. Okay, here's
Yep.
a question. Is Thanksgiving your favorite time of year?
It actually is. I love Thanksgiving. It's a great time for us to all gather and be thankful for what we have. And I'm very thankful that I'm allowed to raise turkeys. It's so fun to watch them growing up. And that's what's most rewarding part of all this is watching them develop from that little yellow yellow fuzzball into these adult turkeys that provide food for everybody else.
And that's kind of what our last question was going to be is what is your favorite thing about being a turkey farmer?
Yep, and that's exactly what it is. That and I get to be in business for myself is another nice thing.
Well, Jake, we cannot thank you enough for hosting us at Fallen Farms today, and Sadie for being our excellent camera person, and all of you classrooms, teachers, and students who joined us. And I know you guys, there's over 100 questions that I didn't get to ask Jake today. So I hope that you are able to do some research. I would strongly recommend the Minnesota Turkey Growers Association website. They have lots of great facts about Minnesota turkey farmers and lots of fun things for you to learn during this Thanksgiving season. But thank you, Jake, for all you do for raising these turkeys and providing us an awesome nutritional thing for us to eat. And thank you, students, for joining us and learning a little bit about Minnesota turkey farmers. Have a great day and enjoy your Thanksgiving holiday.